People don't tend to believe that I am deaf, but it doesn't necessarily have to affect my voice. Deafness is to the ear, and with time it graduates and it gradually steals the voice of the person. So now, in such a case like mobility, in such a case like digital mobility, I think there should be digital access. There should be a digital space where deafs can be easily evaluated to know if they are actually deaf or not, instead of embarrassing them in public. Then that is another one. Then another thing is, um, just like the American Defi for paved way for the moving industry, making it a reality. He what he imagined, he actually brought it to reality and made the moving industry made the piece interested in movies again. Now, the same way, it should be designed with all simplicity. Talking about simplicity, I mean, um, the digital space now. Take for instance, they don't really understand how to use some of these technologies that we have today, and there should be steps to follow, like in the Google Meets, in the YouTube. For you to be able to create caption on YouTube, for you to be able to read caption, you have to follow some instruction. A layman defi, a grassroots defi does not know where to press in order to enable the caption to show. There are some of these things that they should just put it bluntly there, even on Facebook, even on Twitter, even on Instagram. Make it very simple, easy for a deaf person to understand. Not all deafs are really aware of to to all it takes to how do I put it? All it takes to follow procedure. They don't really understand procedure. And when there is no interpreter there to break it down to their level, they become they become bored and they become left out. They don't really understand. But when we make it easy for them, they will understand. Then another thing is the
Thank
digital
you.
space.
Because of our time. Yes. So thank you very much, Veronica. I'll be coming to Benga Ogundare to also share how you see digital can be made accessible, like designed with a universal approach. And I also, when talking about digital space, we basically look at all our social media platforms, our channels whereby we communicate, not just maybe meeting platforms. Just thinking about it holistically. Benga.
Okay, so Blessing, you want me to talk now, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, so now what I said earlier, I mean, I was talking about policy and law. Now, first and foremost, and to make the digital space accessible, I think we have to start from the design stage. Now, the truth is that for persons with disabilities, two things is multidimensional. We have assistive devices, and then we have adaptive devices. Adaptive devices like your phone. Okay, the phone is there, it's what everybody uses. But then it is configured in such a way that a blind person can activate the top there, and then he can use it just like another ordinary person. Okay, so this thing is there. I mean, so like Olushola said, there has to be awareness. There has to be an opportunity for the person to learn how to use it. Okay, the assistive technology, they are there. Okay, so they are designed for persons with disability. Two, there has to be awareness. There has to be somebody who is ready to teach the other person how to use it. So from the design stage, I think our technology creators must always have that in mind, that okay, so persons with disabilities are also going to be using this, and then we should factor their special needs into consideration. And that is what is happening in Nigeria, because in Nigeria, most of our technologists or those who design, because they are not suffering from disabilities, so it becomes impossible for them to think the special needs of a blind person, for instance, or a deaf, or somebody with other form of disability. Okay, so for instance, okay, so a person with ability whose sight is also bad, or the person can see, but then should require some form of large, so that the person does not strain the fading site. So at the design stage, we have to be intentional about creating what everybody, whether the person is disabled or not, particularly for person with disability. You have to be intentional about factoring their specialness into what you are designing. And you see, I mean, if there is no policy and law here in Nigeria, we cannot even do this, because like I said, everybody will just do what they want and how they want, because there is no law that guarantees that, okay, so if you are designing whatever technology, you should consider persons with disabilities in the whole process. So apart from the design, we have to have a policy and we have to have a law that backs this policy up. That's why I said something about the laws we have in the first place. The Discrimination Against Persons with Disability Prohibition Act that Olushola talked about, I've looked through all of the provisions. There is nowhere where inclusion and access to digital technology is mentioned. So the law is defective. We have to go back to that place. The National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy is also defective in the sense that there is no provision, that guarantees access and inclusion for persons with disability. So we have to go there too. So if we do all of this, and then you will come to the design stage, and then we create that awareness that designers and creators of apps and whatever technology to factor persons with disability into their design, then at the end of the day, we have a digital environment that's accessible for all manner of disabilities in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you Benga. You said it better than that. And I would also like to mention it to users as well. There are times these features are there, but we're not. Someone once said accessibility.
There's no awareness. There's no awareness. There's no information about the presence of that particular, access.
The accessibility
feature
are not an extra work. It just means that you've been doing the wrong all along. So for it, which helps to describe pictures and images of a visually person. I don't go without so that a person is coming with understand effectively. All these platforms are, even Twitter, if you want to publish it, post a picture on Twitter, Twitter asks you if you want to add that is a vision to be able to understand the context or
description.
And you make it whoever is now just yes, those are platforms making it access. We ensuring that this, as users, we are also making it for persons with disabilities. While the platforms are there, we also have a role to play to ensure that we release content that are digitally accessible to persons with disabilities. Thank you so much. And sorry. On this question, I think I talked so much about policy, the place of policy, the place of law, and yeah, maybe to make references on policies and laws in existence in the country. So, do you think there are some existing policy frameworks within the African continent? The ones that Olugbenga mentioned, not addressing the disability needs, specific needs of disability. Do you think there should be set up new?
Sorry, Blessings, I can hardly hear you, but I think Veronica should mute. There's a bit of noise that is interfering. Okay, please come over the question again.
Are there existing policy frameworks within the African continent, not just looking at Nigeria alone, that can be modified? That's one. Are there laws that can be modified? And if there are no laws, or are there needs for us to set up new laws and policies to ensure that the digital space is accessible to persons with disabilities? Because you can see that Gbenga has talked repeatedly about the need for those laws to be in existence.
All right, thank you. I mean, speaking about policy is always the starting point for us to, because at the end of the day, the goal is to influence the thinking of people, the mindsets. So I think Benga mentioned America and the UK. And from my experience, what is even more important beyond all of the policies they have is that there's a consciousness of the need for accessibility in many of those countries. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? So, and what our laws and policies are supposed to help us do is to, over the time, help us build the consciousness of the need to ensure that there is disability inclusion and accessibility in everything that we do. From process, but it doesn't stop in process. I mean, in policies should transform to processes. Processes should transform to, influence programs and platforms. Of course, the foundational legal framework that we have on a global scale is the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is quite comprehensive, and of course, which that has been adapted and ratified by Nigeria. And at the national level, we do have the the Prohibition Against Persons with Disability Discrimination Act, which was passed into law in 2019, which in itself has a lot of gap. But more is like Benga mentioned, there's a lot of gap there. But what I have focused on in the last month or years is that we even have one is a good place to start. Let's even make attempts to implement what has been there, and then we can give room for improvement. Because largely, the implementation of the Disability Act, for short, Nigerian Disability Act, has been largely unimplemented, even though the policy gives a 5-year grace period, which is coming to an end soon. But I think the progress in terms of implementation has been really slow. And at the state level, not so many states have, disability law. I think just about 11 states in Nigeria has fully put together a disability bill, turned into an act, and they are trying to implement. And that, of course, still shows in a large extent what the will and the political will of the government to get some of this framework done and implemented. But I would like to take a step back from all of these policies, because if we continue to discuss policy, then we'll all put the blame at the door of the government. And sometimes, with the way the political situation of this country and many other African countries are structured, there's little or nothing sometimes that we can get done in the immediate term, right, in terms of influencing policy and create it. Who are the main stakeholders, right, in disability conversation? We have the public sector, represented by the lawmakers, and even the public sector, there are several areas. The lawmakers is the executive, and they are those who are supposed to drive implementation. Of course, I know through that process was what originated the National Disability Commission. And of course, there's still a lot of questions we want to ask there, because that's supposed to be like the main commission driving the implementation of this policy. But to be candid with you, since that commission has been established, there's still a lot of gap in terms of what the commission is doing to put pressure on the government to review policies or to implement the policy. And that's where we also have to pay attention to the politics within the disability community and the various social barriers that are inhibiting sometimes the lack of capacity to even get some of this policy we all clamor and push to put in place, the lack of capacity to implement it. And that's just one of the stakeholders, the public sector. We have the private sector, which is also a major driver of the conversation. And that's where we are choosing to focus our work significantly in the last couple of years. Because again, there's a federal government policy, a few states like Lagos State have this policy. But the people who are actually driving this conversation are the private sector, who do not yet have any incentive to make sure disability is inclusive, and even have disability policy at organizational level, such that these people that we see, our workplace, we relate to day by day, can begin to influence our conversation. Of course, there's been a very active civil society sector whose responsibility is not just to do what the government should be doing, but also to put pressure on the government to do what it says it will do. But of course, there's still a large gap there in terms of capacity to gather evidence as a way to push the government to get things done, especially in terms of access to ICT. there's also a lot of gap in capacity to even understand how to bridge the gap between the other sector, which is part of the role of the civil society sector. So these are some of the conversations I think we should have if we really want some of these, these policies, especially the one that even exists, to be implemented and reviewed upward before we have a chance at an inclusive society. Because part of our finding when we're doing the research to understand the disability accessibility gap is the government said that there's no finance to even implement. And this is direct from a reliable source, and not just it's from a reliable source. What we have seen and we have heard said that the government do not have enough funds to implement the disability bill the way it should be. Because again, disability inclusion at this point for the country is an afterthought. It's going to cost us a bit more to put this inclusion into place, right? And that will require funds, and the government is saying there's no finances to push this. If the private sector controls this most finance, the government we also know has funding. There's just no political way to divert that funds. How can we bring all of this sector, key stakeholders together? Why one is creating the policy, the other is actually investing to drive it. And don't forget, they are also the creators of some of this equipment, right? And at the end of the day, if we're able to institute the right organizational policy, because this framework and standards exist globally, all we have to do is localize and begin to act. So these are some of the conversations we should have, the questions we should answer, because I think if we keep pushing on policy, we might miss options to bring key stakeholders who can help us to start and drive implementation together.
Thank you very much, Olushola Winikoko. Quite apt. Thank you. And there's something you said. He said policies should turn into processes to inform the product. I hope I got that accurately. And to close the session, because
yes, you got it. To inform programs and products. Yes.
Thank you. I would want to come to Veronica. In 30 seconds, please share your final words about all the things that we've been discussing about closing the digital divide for persons with disabilities. 30 seconds.
For this opportunity to be among those that we talk about digital space and everything. What I want us to add to it is that the new policy, I think it's necessary because because persons with disabilities are really being affected, and I would like persons with disabilities to be considered when setting up these new policies, because they are the one wearing the shoes and they are the one who know where it aches most. So I think in setting new policies, persons with disabilities should also be considered among those that are going to finalize the policy that is going to be followed on in the digital space.
Thank you very much for keeping to the time on that.
All right, so the truth is that we can't afford to leave persons with disabilities in Nigeria behind as far as access and inclusion to digital technology is concerned, because so this, we are talking about a community that's about over 25 million, strong, population. So if you leave them behind, you are hurting the economy itself, because there are professionals in this community who could use digital technology, to contribute to the GDP. But then when the technology, digital space is not accessible, they are not able to function independently or thrive, professionally. And so it hurts the economy itself. So we should consider this when we design policies and laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems like my juju to ensure that you stayed up to 30 seconds really worked. I want to say a very panelists who have shared their insights, dedicated their time to be here today. Sincerely appreciate you for your time. Thank you for believing in the fight towards disability inclusion. I would want to close with this. Disability is not about them. It is about all of us. And anyone can acquire disability at any point in time. So if you don't plan at this particular stage, if anything should happen later in the future, it's going to affect you. So don't see it as them and us. It is everybody in it. Everybody's in it together. And I would like to mention that BUNI Service is available to provide support to organizations to ensure disability inclusion in all spheres. And also remember that disability issue is cross-cutting. So don't say my organization is focused on A, we don't have anything to do with disability. it is a cross-cutting issue and it involves everyone. I'm so sorry we're unable to take questions from the audience, but the platform, the WUVA platform, is available even after the conversation. You can share your questions there, you can share your comments, and trust me, the speakers are also there. They can also respond to your questions via the WUVA platform. Thank you very much, everyone who has joined from various African countries. We appreciate you for your time, and I will say bye for now. And I'm going to say thank you very much, Veronica, in sign language. Thank you, everybody, and bye.